field, you can easily fill this form in from it. Now, in the first section is your contact information. And just like on the paper data forms that we normally send you when we can, it's pre-populated with your information, and you just have to tell us if they're corrections. Now, there's one glitch with the system, or just one reality, I guess you would say, is the fact that you cannot enter and change this information there. You must go up into your profile to change anything on your address that is incorrect. The other thing to keep in mind is it's not going to let you move forward unless there's an address there. So if you have no address, take the time and update your profile, then come back into this page and move forward for data entry. So next, the other thing I should let you know is the data you're entering here is being entered right into the main database. There is no middleman. So what you tell us is what we receive. There is no finish, there's no submit button. Every time you navigate, just by clicking on a new section, you save the data from the previous section. There is, in some sections, a next section button at the bottom. And in some sections, there's a save button, and that save button will also save the data. So whatever you put in here, we automatically have. If you discover in 2 weeks that you got something wrong, or you have additional information from your lake association, you can update the files. So that's quite a good option for this program. So we are working on Moose Lake, and we're on section 2. When we tried to enter the information on Moose Lake, it was really easy to do, and almost too easy. So what do we do now to ensure that we have the right information? Well, we have to find information on this lake, and I'm just going to wing it and pick a lake and pretend this is Moose Lake. It's got to be on this side of this territory. We'll pick this one. So we're going to call it Moose Test Lake. And I'm going to just so to be deleted, so we all know that Cassie's fooling around here. And a brand new fix that you guys have not seen before, we now save where you put that blue dot. So not only can you take your coordinates here and copy it into here, but when we move forward, the location that you have mapped is saved and sent to me for data processing. And then I would say additional information. This is a hard one here. Just east of the Quebec border, large lake. And then I think I'm going to set a section, and I think I'm going to actually put my thing here and say that I survey the, we'll go with Northwest Bay for lack of a better term. So I'm going to put my section as northeast Bay, Newfoundland. And if you have this information, county and district, region, township, please provide them. And this fills in all these blanks that we have here. A couple questions that are very easy to miss. Did you survey the lake last year? Well, obviously no, because it's a new lake. Did you survey the section last year? No. By answering yes to these two sections, we know that at the most we have to correct data. There's no big checking of data that we have to do. A couple points to mention as well is that the county, district, region, those are a bit of an eastern concept. Townships are more eastern, ranges are, to my way of thinking, more western. And depending on where you are, you may have municipal boundaries that fall into one of these two things. County, district, region, I think is listed for a 3-letter term, but just put whatever the municipal boundary you're like in under township or range. What happens next with this is it comes back to us, and we review it, we check it against the Canadian Lakes search the Canadian Lakes Geonames database, or the Canadian Geonames database, and we standardize all our lakes to that database. So we will review this. We may give it a slightly different coordinate than you've given it, and then we acknowledge it and we give it a finalized lake ID number. And then we move on to the next. So if I move on and move back, this is actually a big thing for us who've been using the system for a while. The dot is still there, the information is still there. And then we can move on to the next section. Now that's kind of a big deal. Larissa, does anybody have any questions about that section?
No, no one's asked anything specifically about it, though. We do actually have some questions. If you want to save those for later, or can I go over them now?
If you want to go over them now, we can try. Yep.
Okay, Janet asked, when she clicked on My Lake, a message came up. This error has generated an email that has automatically been sent to our technical support staff. That's a new one.
That's a new one. And that means Catherine, who is our programmer on this program, already has it in her file. There was some kind of glitch that happened, and she's already working on it. Perhaps Janice can put in the chat when this was. I've been rapidly emailing back and forth to Catherine for the last 3 days, and every little glitch I find she's been fixing. So she's been in and out of the programming a lot the last couple of days. So it may have just been timing. If you go back in today, it may not happen again, just because you may have been in there fooling around with, perhaps she was making our maps work right.
And RG Rush Cow has, I'm sorry if I'm messing up your name, has stated that they could only find 2 cranberry lakes, and only one of them in their system has map coordinates, so he's unsure if the second one is his.
Okay, so Mary and Artie, I think you're in Ontario, but I'm not sure. We're going to go with Ontario. And well, maybe we're not, because I've got lots of cranberry lakes. All right, so you will see in some of these locations that there are lakes with no coordinates, or coordinates that are very simple. These are often sites that that are historical sections that we don't have enough information on, or brand new lakes. Like if RD set up his lake last year, I now have access to last year's data. Finally, we got that link working, so I can look it up and find out which cranberry ID he used last year, and we can make that a little easier for him. Ontario, so I've got several that you can choose from here, and perhaps it does exist. If you find out that we do not have coordinates for your lake, if it's not there on the coordinates, pop me an email and I will dig deeper into that. Is it dear? And we'll look into that later. It's pretty much something that has to be handled on a one-on-one. Chances are, if you're missing a coordinate, there's 2 things happening. One, we did not have enough information to establish the lake properly last year, or we just fell behind and never got it done. I will acknowledge that does happen. Or your lake does not have the right coordinates in the system. Either way, we can work on it together and sort that out. Anything else, Larissa?
Nope. No, I think we're good.
All right. So where were we here? Okay, we were on. I've totally lost my word. Return to data entry. Which form are we on? Moose. All right, so we went through section 2, and we're now on section 3. Now, okay, it's surprisingly, I should mention before we go on, it's surprising how many people don't tell us the lake name when they set up a new lake, and don't tell us the section name when they set up a new section. And those are two very important components for us finding your lake in the future. The other thing is, people say, well, what do you mean by section name? That's basically a description of the area that you expect to survey annually. Now, it may not be the same percent of survey, and ideally you want it to represent existing sections if you can. Otherwise, we get way too many sections in the system. But you have to just give us a description that we know where you are, like the Northeast Bay, all the western shoreline in between Hog Island and the West Shore, something like that, so we can identify where exactly you are. The other thing is distance and directions to the nearest town. Well, the fact that you can put that coordinate on really helps, but it also helps just to give us enough information for us to find your location. And that becomes more important the more difficult your location is to search normally. So when you are identifying your lake in the system, think about the fact that it's some poor soul who's never been there, stuck in the middle of Ontario, who has to do that. So any information you can provide on the links help. So I see we're getting tight on time, so I'll try to go through these very fast. A percent survey. Well, this one was a question that was asked. Isn't this redundant? Not necessarily, because you may say you are on a relatively decent sized bay. You may survey 20% one year and 25% another year, all depending on where the loons nest that year. You may survey up to 30%. So through time, we have learned to give ranges on the section. And in this portion, you give the percent of the lake surveyed, not the bay, but the lake surveyed. Another past question we have was a comment about you can't fix the lake information. You're right, you can't. You can provide it to me and we will review the data later and we will fix the lake, but you can't fix it yourself. And that's what I have for section 2. And 3, what is a percent surveyed you use on a very big lake? I always just set it to 1%. If you really think your lake is too big, you can't figure out the percent survey, 1 is a standard that I use. It just keeps life easy. 1% is for large bays, or for a very small section on a really big lake. And later, well, this is less important for our main reproductive success analysis. This comes into play if we do a more local analysis, or if somebody is interested in learning how the loons are doing in their area, then we want to make sure we know exactly how much proportion of each lake is being surveyed, and know if we have to merge data from matching pairs in and things like that. So it's pretty important for that purpose. So I won't go over the loon survey data in too much detail now, but I'll show you a couple cool things. First off, for your large lakes, if you put an 8 in there and say save, you will now have space for 8 pairs. A couple other things to note is that dates relate to the number of literal dates on the calendar you are on the lake that month, not how many days. Like, it doesn't have to be 8 hours of survey, it's just the occasions you've been on the lake that month. So for example, in June you've done 20 dates that you were on the lake. Adult loons is the maximum number of loons that you see during that month. So let's say there was 8 loons C. Now, mated pairs relates to the number of pairs you believe were residents on territory during that month. So we're going to say that there's 5 pairs. Now, the next question, people say, hold it here. You've got 8 adults and 5 pairs. What's up? Well, it's particularly in June, you may only see 1 residential member of the pair because the other one's on the nest. But you know that that particular pair is on the territory. So you mark them down as a mated pair because you're pretty sure you had 5 pairs in total. Now in July, you may have surveyed 10 days. You had some visitors come in. So you had 15 adults and you still had your 5 pairs, and that's how that works. Just for the maximum percent number of young seen. So that means you put in the greatest number you've seen at any date during the month of June, the month of July, and the month of August. So, and that could be none. If you really don't know, use a question mark. Telling us you don't know is better than telling us an answer that you're not sure of. And so far, you put down the number of chicks you've seen. And the same thing with July. Now let's talk about maximum number of large young. You'll read in the instructions that maximum number of large young is based on 6-week-old young. So if you have a hatch at a normal time, which is right around the opening of right around Canada Day weekend, they will happen in August. In some areas like BC, that happens earlier than August. If it's a late hatch because it's a renest, it may happen later. So still put down the maximum number of large young 6-week-olds that you see. But if it's not in August, put a comment somewhere in the box. On the next page is a comment box. I'd also want to mention that that you will have stragglers that come into the lake after the season. So you want to keep an eye on that 6-week age. If you suddenly have 12-week-old young show up, they're not from your territorial pair. They've come from somewhere else, and you would not add those to your list of chicks. All right, what's next? Section 5 relates specifically to nests that you find or know exist. We don't want you to go out and look for this. It's just put there for platforms or if you know there's less in the nest in the area. Section 6 is something that our volunteers told us they want to provide us. And that's personal watercraft activity. And it's just whether you see occasional or a lot. And there's definitions of those on the page. Right now, we know there's an impact of watercraft, not necessarily personal watercraft with loons, but it's very difficult data to tease out. Finally, section 7 relates to other birds you see. We asked for information on double-crested cormorant. This again is what volunteers ask us to collect. At this point, we are not seeing impact on double-crested cormorants and loons. As for the rest of the list, first off, some of you may use eBird. If you use eBird, don't worry about this list. If you do multiple sections of the lake, you only need to do one of these for your lake. And only report the birds that you can know are there or are not there. If you can identify a bird, account for it. If you can't identify a bird, don't worry about it. And keep in mind that this is optional. You do not have to do this if you don't want to. So that was really quick, but I wanted, and we're already at the hour, but I wanted to give you guys a chance to respond if anybody had any questions on this, go into some of the questions and answers. Larissa, do we have anything we need to respond to?
We have a few questions here. Janet wants to know if she found out from a park ranger that a baby loon had died in September. Are we wanting to know this information?
You can always tell us if I like to review those, but as part of the data, we can't do much with it. We just record it and post it to the system. It's not a bad thing to look into your local community or contact the Canadian Cooperative Wildlife Health Centre and see if they can do an autopsy on that bird. But really at that stage, there's not much we can do with the data. We know that the majority, if the majority of loons that live to 6 weeks of age on an inland lake are likely to fledge off the lake. And right across North America, this reproductive success calculation is based on that. Any other questions?
Yeah, a similar one Mark asked was that if they know their loons have failed by mid-July, can they complete their data?
Oh, absolutely. It is so important to have those negatives. So you fill out the form. If you don't see any chicks, you put down 0 all the way through. sadly, too many people don't tell us the negatives. And to get a true picture of how reproduction is going in Canada, we need all the ones that hatch, we need all the ones that grow up, and we need all the ones that no longer exist. So if there's a failure, definitely tell us those zeros. Those are very important.
And another question is, how long is like a survey? If they scan the lake for 5 minutes, does that count as a survey, or do they need to spend a certain amount of time?
It all depends on the lake. You need to remember that this is designed predominantly to be done with your other activity. So it all depends on the lake, the size of the lake, the size of your area you're surveying. If you are confident that you have seen all the loons that you have seen in your survey area, you're done. I qualify that with saying, if you're not seeing loons, take the extra time to look a little closer, because that makes a big difference there. So those non-answers should take longer than the answers about, I have 2 chicks. If you've already seen your territorial pair, you already know how many chicks they have, you already know your answers, you don't have to go farther.
Yeah, we have a bunch of questions coming in now.
Okay, well, I'm going to put the poll up, and then we'll answer the questions while people respond to the poll. And it's just what I'm curious about. I'm just figuring out how to launch it here. And we'll give them, they should be able to answer this in a minute. All right, so what's the next question?
Is the maximum number of loons the most seen in one day, or the total number of loons seen over the month?
Not total, it's a snapshot. So it's the biggest number you see at any point during the month. So if you see 5 on the 5th and 15 on the 20th, it's a 15.
Another one is, if nest locations are known, should I provide GPS coordinates?
We actually have that in the Q&A, but we can touch it here. We don't track them. If you want to get into that much detail, a great place to put the data is Project Nest Watch, which tracks into the Canadian Nest Record Scheme. But for us, it's not information we can use. We really don't need people searching for the nests. So don't worry about sending it to us. We have really no place to store it.
And someone asked also, should they report any renesting?
Yes, that's another question that we have, and we can go over it a bit more later. But basically, the way you would report it is you'd just report zeros, and then when you see chicks, you report 1 to 2 or how many chicks you see at that month. And then just add a comment on the section 5 with the breeding success information. It says, this is a renest, they lost their first nest for whatever reason. And be careful with for whatever reason you give. If you don't know the reason, don't put it down. There's a lot of supposition given about why the nest is lost without actual knowledge. If you do know and have proof of that, feel free to record it.
Okay, someone's asking about eagles. Do eagles take baby loons or even adults?
Ooh, well, that's a toughie. Yes, of course they do, because they're predators. It's a really complex interaction system. Do eagles take chicks? Yes. Do eagles take adults? Yes. Can loons defend themselves from adult eagles? Absolutely. There was a necropsy done in the eastern states this year of a loon, of an eagle that was stabbed to death by a loon. So it's not necessarily the eagle always wins these situations. Is this the biggest problem with loons? Probably unlikely. We know that the big problem seems to be trauma, lead, and trauma and lead are the 2 big ones for now. I'm thinking, give me a few minutes and I'll come up with the 3rd one. Yeah. So we got great answers on the poll. Do we have any questions? Any more questions before I move on, Larissa?
Yeah, we have 3 more. Okay. Someone is interested to know, how do I find out if any other volunteers are surveying the same lake?
I can't can't tell you. And the reason I can't tell you is because of their privacy rights and your privacy rights. I would suggest you make a note, contact your lake association. Many lakes have their own Facebook page, and just put the word out there. I'm surveying. If you have data, send it to me. If you're also surveying, let's get together and work together and use those local options. I can tell you that more often than not, there are never two people surveying the same section. It is incredibly rare.
Okay, someone is interested to know, how do they determine what is a large young bird or 3 adults?
Oh, that's getting technical here. Large young versus juvenile versus adult. A large young is 6 weeks old. It's just starting to look like an adult loon. It's not quite. If you look at the, let me see if I can pull it up here. If you look at the, I make no guarantees I'll succeed at this. At the, what do I have that would show this? Just a second here. I'm pulling up a little image here. I don't know what you guys can see right now. Hopefully not this mess that I have open. All right. The adults have a different pattern than a large young, and they have a different pattern of a juvenile. Something to keep in mind, though, that you're going to rarely see second-year birds the same time as you see adult birds, because those immature stages are on the oceans. They don't stay on the they may stay on the Great Lakes, but they don't stay on the inland waters. The other thing to keep in mind that first year young, when they get quite large, they have more of a scallopy pattern to their feathers, while the adult loons are more of a the checkerboard square pattern that they have. Even when they go gray, they still have a light tone of that checkerboard. And there is a great document out there, and I have it in my information here. And that actually might be the best way of pulling up here. Enter ID of loons. All right, I'm going to share this. I'm going